A recent video that I produced on self-training at home seemed pretty popular, so I'm going to repeat the same formula for you now. What you need is a chess set and board, a paper and pen, and some uninterrupted time. That's all. We're going to go through a top flight game, and I'm going to ask you certain questions about the position at critical moments during that game. What you should do to get the most out of an exercise like this is then simply to turn off the video and consider the position yourself. Perhaps write down your thoughts, write down your answers on the paper, and then check them against what actually happened in the game. If you do this conscientiously, you can't really fail to improve at chess because you're actually concentrating fully on the exercise at hand. How often do we have the chance to do this these days? Because we're all so busy. Well, anyway, this is a really interesting game. It's a game from the European Championships in Dresden, 2007, between Grandmasters Arkady Naidic and Jan Gustafsson. Naidic was white, and he opened with 1e4. As I say, I generally introduce the game for everybody, and then we stop the game at critical moments. It's a Ruy Lopez, one of the most common openings at Grandmaster level. White tries to put sustained pressure on the black position with bishop b5. And Gustafsson is quite happy to go down the main line with a6. White plays bishop a4, keeping the pressure up. Black plays knight f6. White castles, black plays bishop e7, all very well known. And now white takes a small time out to protect his pawn on e4. Well, this is probably the first moment where white is actually threatening bishop takes c6 followed by knight takes e5. So black has got to break that idea up by playing b5. White retreats with bishop b3 and Gustafsson castles, which could have come as no surprise to his opponent. Gustafsson is a specialist in a line we're about to see in this game, the Marshall Gambit. And that occurs after white plays c3, which is the normal Lopez move, hoping to build a centre with d4, and now black breaks with d5. This is a very famous chess opening. Black is offering a pawn. At first sight it seems as though he gets absolutely nothing for the pawn, but let's take play on a little bit further, as in this game Naidic accepts the offer with e takes d5, knight takes d5, white takes the pawn, black recaptures, white plays rook takes e5, and now black just simply plays c6. And around here you begin to think, well, what actually does black have for his pawn? Well, the first point to note is that white's queen side is undeveloped, and it's going to take quite a while for white to get his pieces out. So black uses that time to try to perhaps build a kingside attack. And the way he does this is to maybe hit the rook with bishop d6. The queen will come out to h4. As you can see, black is building an attack very quickly indeed. So white has got to be extremely careful. Now white has quite a few moves here, but at that time the move rook e1, a voluntary retreat, was very fashionable. And that's the move Naidic plays. But if we replace that move, we now come to our first question. Now, a very popular variation since then has gone as follows. White plays d4, which is the absolute main line. Black plays bishop d6. White retreats his rook to e1. Black brings his queen out to h4, typical Marshall Gambit play. White has to block the threat of queen takes h2, check. And black brings his queen to h3. White plays bishop e3, this is the main line. Black brings his bishop out to g4. White plays queen to d3, a very important move, giving him the option of playing queen f1 at some point, getting rid of the pesky black queen. Rook a e8, knight to d2, this is all very well known, and now rook e6, a move recommended originally by Boris Spassky, I believe. But now Kramnik played something interesting recently. He played queen to f1, getting rid of the queen, and now the extraordinary f3. So my first question to you is, how do you assess that move? Kramnik understands fully that there's a bishop hanging on e3. So what I want you to do then is take a little look at this position and try and work out whether f3 is a good move or not. Okay, well that was quite a difficult question, and I'm not surprised if you found the analysis of this position quite tricky. Now, my first thought was that Kramnik would not have allowed knight takes e3 if it was any good. But it turns out that I think knight takes e3 is probably the best move here. Despite the use of this variation by many of the world's top players, including Kramnik and Anand, knight takes e3 seems a pretty straightforward way to solve black's problems. For instance, queen f2 is the main idea, so that there are two black pieces under attack. The knight should retreat to d5. F takes g4. This has all been seen many times. Queen takes g4. Now white's idea is to steer for a better endgame here by taking on d5 and now going queen f3. But I believe I found an improvement for black on most of the moves played so far in this position, and that's queen to h3. A pretty straightforward move, but I haven't actually found this in any databases. Queen h3 looks like a new move. And the point of it is that queen takes d5 is answered by bishop takes g3. That's fairly obvious, so going back to queen h3, white's got to try and find a better move. So maybe rook e2. Just trying to angle for an endgame where white's knight is superior to the black bishop. Then I think h5. And if rook f1 in this position, we go rook takes e2, queen takes e2, and then h4. With sufficient pressure, in my view, to consider the position equal. Well, all the analysis of these Marshall Gambit positions is pretty tricky. So I think objectively that line is equal. I don't know how you found the positions arising in your analysis. Well, let's go back to Neidich versus Gustafsson now, where white played rook e1, black played bishop d6, and now white plays g3. And this is an interesting move order, and quite clever, because it keeps the black queen out of h4. That's the first point of it. So white is forcing black to actually find a different development plan. We note that white has kept his d pawn at home so that he can think about d3 in some lines and also d4. There are plenty of options on the table for white. But now we come to question 2. What should black play here? And I'm going to give you 3 alternatives. Should he play A, bishop f5? Looks like a good move. Should he play B, bishop h3? The move g3 seems to create white square weaknesses around the king, so bishop h3 seems pretty good. Or just dropping back. Should black play the interesting move queen d7 here, with perhaps the idea of playing the queen to h3? So again, this is quite a difficult question to answer because I think all those moves are quite reasonable. Well, will it be a question of taste, or is one of those moves preferable to the others? Over to you now for your consideration. Well, this is a really interesting question because, as I say, all of those moves look reasonable. Now, let's consider queen d7 first. I'm sure a lot of players will like that move. Black puts his queen on a square where it can immediately come into the business zone. But here I think white is well poised to play d3. And the point of that is that when black goes queen h3, white now plays rook to e4. A non-standard move, but I think a very good one in this situation. Black's queen will soon be ejected from h3, and then the whole adventure looks like a loss of time. In my view, Black should develop the bishop on c8 first before he thinks about moving his queen. We don't quite know yet where the queen is best placed. So queen d7 is an interesting idea, but I'm not sure it's best, although I can see why you played it. Now bishop h3 is also tempting, but perhaps again a little too early at this point. Lots of top players have gone this way, but once again I think d3 is the right way to go for white. And the point of this is that when Black plays queen d7, White quickly brings his knight to e4. And this is rather inconvenient for Black. Black doesn't seem to have any way to take advantage of the weak white squares around the king. And meanwhile, the knight on e4 is pretty uncomfortable for Black, because Black doesn't really want the pieces being swapped off. Meanwhile, White is getting ready to move the bishop on c1 and attain a position of full development. So probably the best move here, going back to g3, is the move Gustafsson chose, and that's bishop to f5. So well done if you found that move. And it's a move really which just gets on with rapid development. Black wants to play a move like queen d7, he wants to play rook a e8, and should White play d3 in response to bishop f5, then this pawn is a little bit of a target. Black's bishop is hitting the pawn, and if we think of a rook coming to e8, well, there's pressure on that pawn immediately. So bishop f5 all in all is the best move, and Neidich responded to it with d4. So the queen comes to d7. But immediately that pawn comes to d4, Black's got more control over the light squares, it seems to me. So over the next couple of moves, both players just develop their pieces. White plays bishop e3. Black plays rook a e8. It's interesting here, which rook should you develop to e8? Well, I mean, if you play rook f e8, my question to you is, what are you going to do with that rook on a8? What are your plans for that piece? After rook a e8, it's much clearer. Black is deliberately keeping his rook on f8 in order later on to be able to play f5. Otherwise, there's absolutely no point to keeping the rook on f8 in this position. Rook a e8 is a standard martial move, just completing development. And White in turn responds to that move with knight d2. So bishop goes to g4. White puts his queen on b1. Black plays his bishop on f5 once more. And now, my impression is that this position is equal, and White should just repeat with queen to d1, after which Black probably has nothing better than bishop g4. Lots of games in the martial tend to end in a draw. Black just sets up enough positional pressure to compensate for the pawn, and then White can't really lift the bind that the active Black pieces are imposing on his position. And this is one of those situations. But White plays on with bishop c2. And my next question is, what should Black play here? Well, I think this is a slightly easier question to answer than the others so far, because Black has got a pretty good attacking plan available by simply taking on c2 and then going f5. That to me looks extremely logical. Black opens up the rook on f8. He creates the immediate idea of f4, taking a can opener to the white king. And despite the fact that, you know, he's joined up the white rooks on the back rank, I think this attacking plan is extremely dangerous for White to meet. So I'm sure that most of you got that answer. In fact, if we just retract, it's probable, if White wants to play for a win in this situation, that he's got to find another move apart from bishop c2, because it just gives Black too much of an initiative. I mean, he can try queen c1. That has also been played in this position. But then I think rook e6 is not a bad move here. The rook commonly comes to e6 in the martial with ideas of either doubling rooks there on the e-file or maybe swinging across the third rank to create pressure against the king. This to me should give black enough in this position for the pawn. For instance, if knight f3, we can go bishop g4, knight g5, and now rook to g6. The knight's adventure to g5 is unconvincing, and black's intention is that if white plays f3, he can demolish the white king position straight away with the double sack, bishop takes f3, and then bishop takes g3. This sort of sacrifice comes as no surprise to martial gambit players, and it just looks extremely good here. The cover around the white king is blasted wide open, black's queen comes in, and there are serious mating threats here. The engines show that white's best, if he's got a best move here, is to try and scurry away with king e2, and then rook g2 check just wins, I think, because after bishop f2, the whole chess set comes raining in on the poor white king, and now queen f5 is just very good, forcing white to surrender the queen. Knight f4, check, takes, rook a1, and now the simplest move is just h5. Although white's got 3 pieces for the queen, he's in a complete bind, and black's just getting ready to roll the h-pawn up the board. So all this tends to prove that, you know, earlier on, white's probably got to take the draw here. Queen b1, bishop f5, he's just got to go queen d1 and accept that this position is equal. Nidich is stubborn. He allows this attacking plan with f5, and we're about to see Nidich's point here. He goes c4. Okay, next question. What should black play in this position? Well, Gustafsson played a very good move now. B takes c4. Just wasting no time in getting on with the attack. Now, the point of this is that if black is intimidated by the move c4 and doesn't want to break up his pawn structure, he has to play knight f6 here. And after that, bishop g5 is slightly inconvenient, forcing some exchanges. And probably white's a little bit better here. But b takes c4 is just good. And the point is very simple, that after knight takes c4, we're going to plough on with f4. Why waste time? Whilst the white rook lies on a1, it's not doing anything in dynamic terms. Black is a rook up. Just get on with the attack. But Nidich was, I suppose, reasonably happy here. He played bishop to d2, hoping to trade all the pieces on the e-file. So the next question to you, what should black play next here? Well, I'm pretty sure that Gustafsson played a move now which you all wanted to play straight away. I know I did. And it was a surprise to me that actually this move that was played, f3, was very rare indeed at the time this game was played. Normally black just retreated his bishop in this position, and white then traded on e8 and played queen to d3. This idea of queen to d3 is the main resource for white in this position, so that if queen h3 we go queen f1, and with the pieces coming off, maybe white is a bit better in this position. So f3, just getting on with the job. White's probably got to play his queen to d3. Well done if you found f3. And now what is black's point? We're coming to the crux of the whole matter here. Black played f3 for a reason. What is that reason? What did black do next? Okay, well, this is the big moment in the game, and great players have an uncanny ability to sense these moments coming up. If you found black's next move, consider yourself a really strong player. It's the interference move, rook to e2. the key to the whole position. And the obvious point of it is that the queen, the white queen, is blocked from reaching f1. Black's threat is queen to h3, which is the end of the game, more or less. So white's got to take this rook. Now the queen comes over to h3. And my final question to you in this game, has white any defence at all against the mate? Well, the answer to this question is not really. I mean, he could try queen takes f3 and pretend that he's got some compensation for the queen after rook takes f3, knight takes d6. At least this time he's not getting mated, and he's got a rook, he's got a bishop, and he seems to have 2 pawns for the queen. But much more pressing in this position is black's attack, and knight f6 just seems to be better for black. For instance, if rook a1, setting the transparent trap, knight g4, rook e8 check, when it's white that checkmates. Black should just go h6. And I think with the idea of knight g4, black is just winning here. If white tries rook e3, we can take it. And white doesn't have a good recapture. If he takes with the pawn, black goes knight g4, rook e2, knight takes h2, takes, and white is laid to waste. Meanwhile, going back to rook e3, bishop takes e3, well, once again we go knight g4. Black's speed of attack is paralysing. Knight c4, what else? Knight takes h2. White brings his knight in. And now I think just pushing the kingside pawns is going to put white away. It's very difficult for white. White's king is just blasted open before he can do anything. So that would not be good for white, but it's better than what happened in the game, as white played knight to e3. And now, well, we will have one more question. Okay, what did black do here? How did black polish white off? Okay, well, once again, this was a test of your combinational ability. Black played a beautiful move, rook f4. A marvellous move, setting up the idea of rook h4 and noting that if white takes on f4, we simply take with the bishop. And then white can't defend himself on h2. Again, this is such a typical martial motif, this idea, that I wouldn't consider it highly original. It's the sort of thing that's happened many times before, but nevertheless, it makes us proud to play such a move in our own games. And let's just check it out that it does actually win. White comes lumbering in with queen takes a6. We go rook h4, why not? We allow the checks, queen a8 check, king f7, and now we see that black is relatively safe. I mean, white's running out of checks. If he tries the so-called clever move, queen e8 check, we can just take it. Knight f5 check, take the rook, take everything on offer. Knight takes h4. White hasn't got anything like enough compensation for the queen. So rook f4, and that was that. Knight is resigned. A complete wipeout of an incredibly strong grandmaster in only 25 moves. And that's how dangerous the martial gambit can be. As I say, it does tend to lead to a lot of draws at the highest level of chess, but of course that's no bad thing for black, because black tends to suffer in many of the lines of the closed Ruy Lopez. Well, I hope you enjoyed that game, and although the questions were tricky this time, and sometimes a bit open-ended, I hope you enjoyed the questions as well, and that you learned something from the game. So thanks for viewing, and we'll see you next time.